The story kicks off with Yusuke, a high schooler who absolutely despises his social life, the city, and everyone in it. He escapes into video games to dodge constant rejection, becoming a bystander in other people's lives. He watches his athletic classmates and the popular perfect girl named Shindo, which only fuels his desire to stay in his fantasy world as a lone wolf. But one day, while cleaning the classroom, he's suddenly whisked away to a different reality. Completely clueless, he runs into Shindo and her friend Kusu, who seem to know their way around this game-like world. As soon as our hero shows up, the Game Master appears, basically the most important figure here. He brought them to this reality to tackle various missions, with the reward being answers to any questions about this world, plus a new team member after each completed quest. Here, he gets a chance to pick a class. Shindo is a mage, and Kusua is a warrior. Unfortunately, the protagonist gets stuck with the hardest class to get, Farmer, which only gives him useless tools for combat. But his teammates are a bit of a mess too. Despite having good classes, they've mostly scraped by on pure luck. So, it falls to the farmer to handle most of the combat, and thanks to this, they find a safe spot where the girls reveal the answers they got from the previous 2 missions. It turns out the Game Master is apparently a being from the future who handpicks people for his missions. It's not random, someone specifically chose them. Now they have to face another, more difficult mission. They need to help a village leader keep his town safe. However, before they even get there, they lose Shindo in an ogre attack. In this world, they can revive after 30 seconds, but if the whole team dies at once, it's game over for good, both here and in real life. So, they leave her behind for now. When they reach the village, it seems peaceful, so the protagonist decides to leave Kusue as a sort of life insurance policy so they can revive. This is mainly because, despite being a swordswoman, she's useless in a fight, and he sees her as more of a liability. With that, he heads into the forest alone to grind some levels. During this time, he remembers his childhood in a small village, a happy time with friends and experiences that vanished when he moved to the city and was thrown into a life he never understood. But something more critical happens. When he snaps out of it, he sees the village is under attack by the ogre. He regrets his selfish decision to leave his teammate in charge of the whole town. With no plan, he gets cornered, but luckily, he was just shy of enough experience to hit level 10, which he manages at the last second right before being eaten. And so, the Game Master shows up to grant him a new class, which doesn't turn out to be great, as his bad luck saddles him with the profession of a cook. At least he uses the knife to seriously wound the ogre, allowing his 2 teammates to rejoin the fight. With a bit of teamwork, they manage to defeat the enemy and secure the village, thus completing the mission. At that moment, the Game Master reappears, and Yusuke takes the chance to ask, "What will happen when we finish all the missions?" The guy answers by showing him images of another reality, where the same team of heroes, but with more experience, will have to save humanity from a giant beast, revealing that this is also their future. And just like that, they all return to their reality at the exact moment they left, but now facing a much tougher task. This makes the protagonist realize he needs to step up his teamwork if he wants to be ready for what's coming. Because of this, he starts interacting more with his teammates, especially Shindo, who seems to have a particular interest in him. Suddenly, Yusuke gets a message from the Game Master for a special solo mission, to win over Yuka, a student from a nearby academy. When he looks for her, he finds out she's being bullied by her classmates. Yusuke steps in to save her, albeit in such a bizarre way that he ends up looking like a creep in the women's restroom. But hey, that was the Game Master's real mission, to rescue her from that situation. And when they return to the game, that very same girl becomes his new battle partner, though she does spread his reputation as a creep a little. Anyway, the important thing is they now have a new mission. Explore 5% of the map. In the process, they run into a giant centipede, a beast that is obviously way out of their league. However, we notice something about the protagonist that we'd seen in the previous mission. When he's in a dangerous situation, his mind stays unusually calm, quickly finding an escape route and erasing any self-doubt or fear. In this instance, his approach works perfectly to defeat his opponent, which leaves his teammates stunned. Things cool down, and we're shown some flashbacks of a young Shindo, a strong-willed girl who was never bullied and who befriended a girl who was the complete opposite, having been harassed her whole life for her appearance. Eventually, after so many hurtful comments, the girl took her own life, an event that traumatized Shindo by showing her just how cruel people could be. Luckily, she had plenty of friends who supported her in building the life she has now, one that nobody can criticize. So now, caught in this world with a high chance of dying, she asks the protagonist for them to get out of this together, safely. The next day, they realize that every time they return to this world, several years have passed. Even so, they must press on with their second mission, to reach a city on the other side of the map. First things first, they need to get horses. Thanks to an old man's advice, they figure out the best way is to win a tournament in the nearby kingdom. But as soon as they step into the forest, they're ambushed by bandits they can't attack, because fighting humans would automatically lower their level. So, once again, the three girls get captured, leaving the protagonist as the last one standing. He trains a bit, levels up, and gets the plant mage class, something so useless he ends up losing the tournament in the first round. Fortunately, he runs into a warrior named Kavel, who knows about his heroic deeds. She agrees to help him if he accompanies them on a hunt for some bandits, who just so happen to be the same ones who kidnapped the girls. This way, he can solve two problems at once. However, even though the bandits are weak, they had a beast caged up that manages to corner even Kavel. Once again, the protagonist uses his instincts at the perfect moment to wound the great wolf, allowing his new ally to finish it off, saving her. They grab the jewels, solve the problem, and get the warrior to lend them some horses, and even join their team to find the city they're looking for. Meanwhile, we see some flashbacks of Kusyu, who always felt inferior as a child because of her frail body, feeling like she couldn't do anything. Now that she has this chance, she wants to help as much as she possibly can, not just to complete the mission, but to help anyone in need. This clashes with the protagonist's mindset, as he believes that if this reality is a video game, they should stick to completing the missions. Still, he decides to play along with Kusyu and help some guards from another kingdom who are under attack by werewolves. They handle the situation, but then they discover something important. Those humans were transporting prisoners to another kingdom to be executed for heresy. Now, they're not sure if this counts as an indirect kill or if it's part of the mission, since their quest was not only to explore 5% of the map, but also to deliver cargo to a distant city, and these heretics could be that cargo. They decide to escort the guards while they figure out what to do. After talking to the prisoners, they learn they were locked up for having different beliefs and for not viewing the king as the owner of everything. Despite knowing how unfair this is, they remain neutral for the time being, though the girls find it harder to stay composed. The next day, the leader of the guards leads them down a supposed shortcut, only to ditch them in ruins filled with traps. They try to manage, but the protagonist falls through a hole and has to go on alone. The problem is, the girls awaken the Yokadi. Area's boss, a gargoyle, and Shindo decides to face it, while the protagonist struggles to climb out. But he can't help but ask himself, why am I even doing this? He then recalls his past, his time in the village, and how he went from being surrounded by great friends and unforgettable moments to a city where he only found harassment, which turned him into a loner. However, he's also aware that in this new reality, he's basically a team leader and can't let them die because of his own weakness. So, with all his might, he manages to escape the hole, only to find that Shindo defeated the beast, but Kavel is unconscious in the water. Without a second thought, the protagonist decides to save someone from this world for the first time. She is incredibly grateful, maybe even a little more than that. But time is ticking, so they decide to split into two groups. One will find the traitors and rescue the prisoners, while the other will check if there's any other cargo heading to the city to make sure they're on the right track. The protagonist stays with Kavel and Yuka to go after the traitors, coming up with a plan where the fire mage pretends to be a deserter from the heroes to suggest an alliance. She successfully lures two guards, while the protagonist arrives to trap the last one and save the prisoners. He stages an entire scene, using mannequins to fake the heretics' deaths so no one will look for them. But to make it more convincing, the protagonist burns the captured guard alive, revealing a pretty cold side of him, as he thinks of everyone as mere NPCs in a game. However, Kavel doesn't hold back either, because when the other two guards try to flee, she takes care of them herself. This news reaches the evil king, who brands the heroes as enemies to be eliminated and dispatches one of his assassins. Meanwhile, Shindo and Kusyu are searching all over for other cargo without much luck. The protagonist isn't convinced the prisoners are the package, so he considers three possibilities: the guards' jewels, the guards themselves, or the prisoners. They decide to gather everything and take it to the city, where they are surprised to find that the correct answer was the heads of the corrupt guards. But since they're short on time, they don't dwell on it and focus on finishing the main quest. To do this, they split up, with each person exploring a section of the map to complete the required percentage. This is where they part ways with Kavel, who is left regretting not confessing her feelings to the protagonist, but ultimately couldn't find the courage. Yusuke and his companions go their separate ways, but just as they're about to complete the mission, it starts to snow, and things get complicated. Yusuke has some gear for the cold, but his teammates don't, and with the freezing temperatures, if they die, they can't revive. This becomes Kusui's fate, as she is the first to fall. Meanwhile, the protagonist, though moving faster, runs into an ice giant. It looked like a major boss, but it turned out to be weaker than expected. It was a starving mother with her young, whom Yusuke decides to leave behind, figuring it's just a game after all. However, a bit later, he falls through a hole and is knocked unconscious. Meanwhile, Yuka, though pushing forward, still feels the pessimism of her real life, where her only solution was always to give up without a fight. But it seems something shifted after that day in the bathroom. Using imaginary characters for motivation, she refuses to be defeated so easily and finally manages to summon her fire mage powers. As for Shindo, she also succumbs to the cold. That leaves only the protagonist, who upon waking in the cave, searches for a way out, but ends up being devoured by a worm. This leaves Yuka as their only hope. After covering a good distance, she meets a stranger who offers to help her travel the remaining stretch, which is just enough to complete the mission in time. As a result, everyone revives, and the Game Master appears. Yuka asks him if this world is actually a video game, and he reveals that it's not a virtual world at all, but a series of alternate realities shaped by people's choices. This is tough to swallow, since from the start there were skills, levels, and an inventory, but all of that only applied to the protagonists. So if anything was virtual, it was just them, because that world was as real as their own. This revelation leaves the protagonist in total shock, as he now grapples with the weight of all the people he killed or let die. Upon returning to his reality, Yusuke withdraws into his own world where, despite hating everything around him, he can't handle the guilt of having killed someone. Without noticing, he begins to change. For instance, his fear of rejection morphs into coldness and a touch of arrogance. Right then, he gets a message from the Game Master for another solo mission. This time, he appears in his room as a little girl and asks him how it felt to kill someone. As it turns out, Yusuke is genuinely remorseful. Without another word, the Game Master takes him to a restaurant and tells him that the new team member is about to walk in, a person willing to kill for money. His job is to stop it from happening, and he succeeds, showcasing his training with a few moves that are enough to take down the accomplices and reveal the identity of Keita, who needs to do the job to support his brother. The problem is, the gang leader shows up to sort things out, and the Game Master has no choice but to grant his power to the protagonist, who quickly immobilizes the mob boss. It's here we learn the true purpose of these solo missions. As mentioned, the Game Master is a being from the future, and making small changes can alter the course of history. For example, if the protagonist hadn't saved Yuka from being bullied, she would have given up during the last mission. The same logic applies now. If he had let someone be killed, it would have had damaging consequences for the future. And so, Yusuke became the chosen one to ensure all these missions succeeded, finally understanding his true role in this world and that of his team. Together, they would be in charge of saving the city, no matter how much he hated everyone living in it. But well, if you've made it this far, comment the word Daisuki to let me know you've reached the end. Here on the screen, I leave you with these two cool videos, just like the person watching this video. See you next time. Take care, drink water, take a shower, and bye.